So we will tell you how we found out what happened in Bell, which I assume most of you are familiar with. Now 8 people, former Bell officials, have been charged. The city's on the verge of bankruptcy. No trial date has been set yet. There probably, sometime this year, there will probably be trials for these people. There'll probably be a couple trials. But this whole thing started out with Reuben when he was covering the neighboring city of Maywood.
All right. Okay, so in June of 2010, I was covering a council meeting in the city of Maywood, which is next door to the city of Bell. And what I had learned is that the city was planning on dismantling their police department. They were having financial issues. And so I'm out covering this, and I'm talking to people there at City Hall, and I also learned that they're not only going to dismantle the police department, but they're going to lay off everyone in City Hall. And I thought, wow, this is unheard of. And sure enough, at that council meeting, they do decide to get rid of the police department, fire all the employees, and then they also, at the same time, decide to contract these services out. So they contract policing services with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and the municipal services, they contract that with the city of Bell. So that really, we wrote about, that's when Jeff came in and we wrote this story. And then
well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about these cities. You go down the 710 freeway. Bell is about 12 miles southeast of downtown LA. It is a 90% Latino city, about 50% foreign-born, which means most of those people are probably illegal. Population of right around 40,000 people.
Right, so, sorry. So while we're looking into possible malfeasance in Maywood, because that's sort of what you want to look for to see, was there any misuse of funds going on in the city? And so I believe Jeff called the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, they, particularly the Public Integrity Division, which handles, any possible government corruption cases. And so you called them, and what did they tell you?
Well, I called them. We had heard rumors that there were investigations going on in Maywood, and so I called up the DA and I said, so are you guys investigating Maywood? And the DA tells me, no, we're not, because our other people are. And we assumed it was the FBI, although we've never been able to confirm that. And then I don't know why I said this. I said, what about Bell? And the DA says, as a matter of fact, we're investigating the high salaries their city council members are getting paid. Now remember, as being city council in a city like Bell, it's like in Pomona, it's a part-time job. You get $4 or $6 grand a year, something like that. So I say, well, how much money are these people getting paid? He says, we think about $100,000 a year. And I say to him, well, I should quit my job and run for city council in Bell. And so then he sends me some documents, and we write a story saying that this poor city council members are getting paid around 100 grand a year, and the mayor tells us that, yeah, in a city like Bell, which is a tough place, you should get paid more money. Now, that story reminded me a lot of a story I had done many years ago when I worked at the San Jose Mercury News. I'd done a story on the East Palo Alto Sanitary District. This is the place that deals with the sewers. Now, East Palo Alto is a very different city from Palo Alto. Palo Alto, Stanford's there, middle of Silicon Valley, wealthy place. East Palo Alto is literally across the railroad tracks. Poor city. Once upon a time, that when Palo Alto was dry, it's where the Stanford kids used to go to buy their booze. Mainly minority city. One year had the highest murder rate in the country. So I had done a story about how the sanitary district, the nicest building in the city, was a real Taj Mahal, was built by the sanitary district, and how staff members and the elected directors there had traveled around the country, staying in fancy hotels, fancy meals, spent money on other things I shouldn't have, and at least one of those people was charged by the DA. So that what was going on in Bell reminded me very much of East Palo Alto, of similar minority cities. I figured if these guys are getting paid $100,000 a year, they're probably ripping off the city in other ways. So the next day, Ruben and I go to Bell. And we ask to see the city manager, this guy named Bob Rizzo, because we want some documents, and he won't come and see us. Which is odd, because it's not very often that two reporters from the LA Times show up in Bell. City clerk comes out. We tell her, okay, here's what we want. We want to see minutes, we want to see employment contracts, we want to see expenses. Do we want to see anything else? I think that was pretty much it.
Those were the documents.
And so she says, okay, and pulls out a form, and I fill it out and figure this is some, bureaucratic thing. And then she says, okay, we'll give it to you in 10 days. Now, according to the State Public Records Act, she's entitled to take 10 days. It should have taken her 10 minutes. She should have turned around, given her this stuff, and said, knock yourself out. So I told her, well, if we don't get it in 10 days, we're going to sue, which we would. And then I asked her for a copy of this document we filled out, and she gives me a copy and charges me $1. So you can see as all this is going, it's kind of raising questions. So then these 10 days go on, and every day I'm calling the city clerk. When I get a hold of her, she's getting increasingly irritated. I'm saying, documents ready? She says, told you 10 days. And I'm saying, we don't get them, we're going to sue. And then when we win, because we will, we're going to ask the judge to force you guys to pay our legal bills, because that's part of the law. And so I assume a lot of you are aspiring journalists. When you file a Public Records Act request, or when you ask for documents and they say they're exempt, your line to them is, you tell me what section of the law are they exempt under. They need to tell you that. You don't have to tell them why. They have to tell you why they can't give it to you. Okay, so for these 10 days are going on, and I also am talking to some people in Bell who'd gotten in contact with us after that first story on the council salaries. Get a sense something's wrong. No one can put their arms around it, but something's wrong in Bell. Day 9. City clerk calls me up, says, we're going to give you the documents tomorrow, and Mr. Rizzo would like to meet with you. I say, great. Where? And she says, Little Bear Park, which strikes me as rather odd. And so we go, okay. So the next day, Ruben and I go separately to Little Bear Park, which is the kind of place I would bring my 4-year-old to. And I literally had visions that we were going to meet on a park bench. And Ruben and I didn't talk about this probably for a couple months after this, but we were both worried we were getting set up. I told my wife where I was going, which, I told my editor, which I usually don't. And let me tell you what Ruben did. Well, let Ruben tell you what Ruben did.
Well, I didn't tell anyone, actually. I just left, but not a good idea. I went down to Little Bear Park, and I got there a few minutes early because I thought maybe I kind of want to see these people pull in and see who they are as they're walking in. So I parked the car, and there's a tiny little parking lot there. And so as I'm sitting there, I just realized I have visions of a white van pulling up and me stepping out of the car, someone dragging me inside the van and then speeding away, and then there I go,
He watches too much TV.
Yeah. So I thought, well, if that's going to happen, I am going to write down all the models of the cars around me, the license plate, the colors, what time it is, which space I'm on. You know, it's just, I'm writing all this down in my notepad, and then I rip off the piece of paper, put it under the passenger seat, because I thought, okay, so I get out of the car, here comes the white van. You know, they pull me into the van, drives off. Now they're going to try and get rid of my car, right? Is what I'm thinking. And sure enough, they'll probably get rid of it somewhere. But someone's going to find it. They're going to be looking for me, and they're going to find my car. And underneath the passenger seat, they're going to find this little note that says it has all these license plate numbers, and jumpstart the investigation, and somehow make it to the lead of the story, you know. But it didn't go that way. So, right around, was it 1 o'clock, I think, that we scheduled this appointment. And so I walked out, and sure enough, met up with Jeff. And lo and behold, it wasn't just Bob Rizzo we were going to meet that day. In fact, he brought in like about 10 people.
And it was not, it turned out we didn't meet on a park bench. We met in there was a room, sort of a conference room where the Boy Scouts meet. There were a couple, you know, flags and fireplace. And we walk in, and Rizzo has brought with him 10 people. 2 lawyers, 2 city council members, a city council member from Maywood, a bunch of city officials. Obviously, he was trying to intimidate us, which, what are they going to do, beat us up? You know, I mean.
And, you know, the interesting thing is that the conference room was used by Boy Scouts, which was weird.
Yeah.
You know, they're all telling us this is where they have the campouts, and okay, so we sit down, and then
and we sit, and Ruben and I, it's sort of this table, big table, fitting all these people around it, and these documents are next to us, and they assumed we were going to look at these documents and ask them questions. But you know, we're getting the documents. What do we need to waste our time looking at them then? So we start asking them questions, and eventually I look over at Rizzo. And what I had heard when I was talking to people is that this Rizzo guy makes a lot of money. How much? Oh, $300,000, $400,000, which is a lot of money for a city manager, but it's, you know, really not really that far out of the ballpark. Okay, so I turn to Rizzo and I say, so how much money do you make? Remember, his contracts are next to us, which we haven't looked at. And Rizzo says, $700,000, which was such a huge amount of money, I wasn't sure I'd heard correctly. I figured maybe you were saying $7,000 a month. Remember, we walk into this meeting, we have no idea what we're walking into. And so I say to Rizzo, how much? And he says, $700,000. And then Ruben says,
as I'm writing this, I say, Jesus Christ. I mean, I'm writing down $700,000, and I'm saying, Jesus Christ. And the city attorney is sitting next to me, and he sort of kind of eyes me, and I'm like thinking, oh, I just give away the story. I'm like, but it's too late. They're already in the room. You know, what they essentially did is they put all the eggs in one basket, and so we were just going to crack every single one of them. And so, sure enough, that's what we did. We asked the police.
Well, first they stood. We asked Rizzo. We said, you're probably the highest paid city manager in LA County.
And he agreed.
Yeah, he says, if that's the number, he said, I'm sure I am. If that's the number people choke on, maybe I'm in the wrong business. I could go into private business and make that money. This council's compensated me for the job I've done. And they all jumped to his defense.
Right. I think the council members were basically, I think we went around the room asking everyone, you know, well, we asked the police chief, how much do you make? And he said $457,000. Now,
the police chief had been the police chief of Glendale, much bigger city, 10 times the size of Bell, I think. Who'd retired a week later, taken the Bell job. And when I asked how much you make, he says $457. And then I said, and how much did you make in Glendale? And he said $220.
And that's like more than, you know, LAPD, police chief, Sheriff Lee Baca, New York Police Commissioner. I mean, this guy's making way more than these guys. And,
more than the president.
And that's right. And he's overseeing practically about 30 officers in a 2 square mile city, nearly 2 square mile city. So it goes to show you that was he has a good salary. And then we asked the assistant city manager, Angela Spasha. Now, Angela Spasha had, a few weeks prior to all this, had been sent by Bell to Maywood to help out. The Maywood's city manager had left the city because he had enough with politics there. And Angela Spasha was brought in to help out, just sort of, a city helping out another city, the mutual aid thing that they were doing. And so she was already in Maywood. And at this point, we asked her, how much do you make? And she said, one of my favorite lines is, I don't know. I was like, how do you not know? I mean, come on. How do you not know? Everyone knows how much they make, and we just kept hammering her on this. And eventually Bob Rizzo intervened and told us how much she made.
Well, actually, Rizzo said she makes about $350. Actually, she made $376.
Yeah, which we later on learned.
Right, yeah.
We were all wrong on those figures.
We'll get to that.
But that's where we led up to the justification. As a reporter, you want to get, you want to hear them out, get their side of the story. And so we asked, how do you justify these salaries? And the council members were like, well, our community's clean, there's no graffiti out here, and our parks are great. And actually, I got to give them to that. They do have great parks there. And so they were like bragging about, and I'm just thinking, well, this is how a city is supposed to be. So you still haven't really answered the question. And Bob Rizzo sort of had a pretty good answer. He said, look, I came here in 1993. The city was practically in the red, and I helped them pull them out of near bankruptcy. And now I brought in positive cash flow, which was some truth to that, but he neglected to tell us how he was doing that. And we'll get to that as we're telling the story.
So this meeting went on, it started at 1 in the afternoon, went on for 4 hours. When you could feel the tension just cranking up, and then you bring it down. Remember, we mentioned the city council salaries, and so 2 council members were there, and so we asked them, so in your real lives, do you guys make $100,000 a year? And Oscar Hernandez, who was then the mayor, it's also part of the council, who owned a little bodega next to the park, he smiles and said, yeah, I make more than that, which we don't think is true. And then Luis Artiga, who's a minister, a pastor of a church there, had been appointed to the council, as most council members are, in 2008. And he said he had no idea how much money he was going to be making when he was appointed. And so I said, well, what did you think when you got that first paycheck? And he said, I thought it was a gift from God. And later on, he would refer to Rizzo as, not in this interview, but later, as being sent by the devil. And like I said, this went on for 4 hours. And one of the things we had heard is that a councilman named Victor Bayo had resigned from the council, but was still getting his salary. Can't be true, right? I mean, that just doesn't happen. So we asked the question. What they tell us is Victor Bayo had resigned. They had then made him the only paid person on the city food bank. He was working 4 hours a month, getting $100,000 a year. So the meeting ends. Left in the room are the 2 of us and Tom Brown, one of the attorneys for the city. And he says, yeah, I told them they had to give you the documents, that they would take a hit and things would blow over. So then when Ruben and I were walking out, we figured we had 20 stories out of this thing. And this is a Friday. And we look at each other and we go, Betty's the highest paid city manager in the state. Take a couple more steps. Betty's the highest paid city manager in the country. And we were not able to find out any of this because the City Managers Association, the League of Cities, none of them kept track of this, which we found very, very surprising. Now, what we also learned later on is a couple hours before our meeting, Rizzo had called in Hernandez and Artiga, the 2 council members there, and said to him, listen, the $300,000 a year I told you I was making? Well, I'm making 700 grand. And what we also know is that Rizzo was actually giving out fake figures on his salary. That he, a fellow in town by the name of Roger Ramirez in 2008 had asked, he shows up at a city council meeting, says, so Bob, how much money are you making? How much is the council making? And Ramirez, they tell Ramirez, oh, come to the city hall and file a public records request, which is stupid. They should just tell him right there. So he does, and he gets a memo that says that Rizzo makes $185,736 a year. Council members make $8 grand a year. We also know is that a few years ago, as LA Times reporter showed up, asked how much Rizzo made, was given a document that showed he made $221,000 a year, and Rizzo made 25, and the council made 25 grand a year. So we come out of this meeting, and it's Friday. We don't know, this being the LA Times, we're not sure whether we're going to turn this into the usual LA Times 6-month project where it's 3-part series starting on the front page, jumping to 2 inside pages. And we don't even tell our editors about it, what we found out. Except it was either Saturday or Sunday. It just happened. Both of us were working. And Ruben did mention it to the editor working there. And so they told us, we better hurry up and get this thing in the paper about the guy's salary. So we're trying to sort it out and put things in perspective, which in context oftentimes is what makes a story. If Rizzo makes 700 grand, what the context is, how does that compare to other city managers? And so by now, I've looked at Rizzo's contract and I've added it up, and the contract is clearly written in a way to make it more difficult for you to figure out how much money he makes. The contract says he makes gets a 12% a year increase. It says how much he gets per pay period. It doesn't tell you how long a pay period is. They're obviously hiding things, but I figure it out, and I come out with that he makes $787 and change, so, which is different from the 700 he told us. And so I asked Ruben, you do the calculations. And Ruben comes out with the same figure I did. So I call Rizzo. This is the last conversation either one of us ever had with him. And I say, Bob, I come out with 787. You say 700. Tell me what the difference is. And he says, well, I think you're high, but that's okay. So I tell Ruben, tell you what, I'm willing, let's go with our figure. I'm willing to write the correction that says Bob Rizzo didn't make 787. He only made 750. And it turned out we were wrong. Because a couple months later, we wrote a story that said that Rizzo actually made $1.5 million a year. And the way he made that money was he had 26 weeks vacation, not accumulated over the years, 26 weeks vacation and sick leave every year that he would cash in. Spaccia, same deal. Randy Adams, the police chief, had a deal, although he denied it. So that's why they made the money. Now, out of all the stories we wrote, what, over 100 stories on this?
More than 100.
Yeah.
Close to 200, actually, I think.
And, when we wrote these stories, we had them nailed. There was, we don't put stories in the paper unless we've got them nailed. And we had this one nailed. We had the documents on him making $1.5 million. It was so unbelievable to me, I didn't sleep that night. I just knew there was a mistake somewhere. It couldn't be possible, but it turned out it was true. Okay, so this, and then we do the story. Our story comes out Wednesday evening on our website. Thursday morning in the newspaper.
And when the story hits Wednesday night online, which I thought was interesting, considering that we've been, there's this whole thing about the internet and print, and I realized we didn't get much feedback. But the next morning, when the actual paper hit the stands, we were getting, I started getting emails as early as 5 in the morning, and it just went on and on and on all day.
All hell just broke loose. And part of that was because the layout, there was a great layout, very un-LA Times layout. Front page, big headline which said, "Is a city manager worth $800,000 a year?" With, it looked like a stock market chart of Rizzo's salary going year by year up.
Yeah, and you know, that infuriated a lot of people just because this is at a time when people are losing their jobs, and here's this guy, you know, and he's making more than what the president makes. That's outrageous. These were the kind of emails we were getting where just people were angry, and then there were the usual tips that we get from people, and you know, there were tips of, come check out my little town. It's just as bad as Bell, and
people from Denver, from New Jersey, from Long Island saying, "Come investigate our
towns
city."
I didn't even know existed. I'm like, what? But you know, when that story came out, obviously the next step for the paper is to do a reaction piece, is to write about how people react to this idea of people, of this guy making this much money, of these city officials making this much money. So, sure enough, there's a council meeting that Monday. So
the story comes out in the paper Thursday. Monday,
right.
There was a council meeting already scheduled,
Right.
which he had to go to because he's the young guy. And so he goes, and I'm in the office. 6 o'clock was a council meeting, which is really not a good time for a council meeting, because if you want people to come to your council meeting, which is probably why they had it at 6, you want people to come home from work and get it. So he goes to the meeting.
So I pull up, and every parking space is taken up by the media, basically. And there are hundreds and hundreds of residents sort of protesting, and they've got signs. One of my favorite ones is this sign that read, you know, "Welcome to the city of Bell, where the council makes more than you do. Also, we have great parks." I just thought that was hilarious. The irony in that is because you remember when we were in that meeting, they were trying to get their justification for these salaries, and they said, "Well, we got great parks," and so. And it was, you couldn't even see the grass. There was just so many people there, and they're just angry, and they want these people out of the town. And there's a reason for that, because for so many years, all these residents, homeowners there in Bell, were paying the second highest property taxes in LA County. And the reason for that was because the city had passed all these bond measures for projects that, you know, included a sports complex. And so when they found out that this is the reason why, none of these projects ever really got off the ground. That you know, they were used to basically repair parks, and then this is where, again, where Bob Rizzo was, he mentioned that there was a positive cash flow now. Well, it turns out after some auditing that was done to the city, it turns out that he was using bond money to basically show that the city was doing financially well, and that's why he was able to get those salaries, the salary figure that he had. And so this is why people were angry, because they were paying for those projects that never went anywhere. And then they come to find out these people are making the council members are making nearly $100,000, and this guy's making $800,000. It's just, anger just to the extreme limit.
The thing that sort of dominated Bell was because of these high salaries, there was a voracious need by the city government, because you got to keep the city going, and remember the economy's turned down, which cuts the taxes that the city's getting. There was a voracious need for money to pay all these people. So there were so many things Bell was doing: impounding cars, setting up, road cops would set up, stops for drunk driving, and basically it was a scam so they could stop. They knew there were all these illegals, so they could stop them. They wouldn't have licenses, impound their cars, charge them outrageous fees. So much that happened in Bell was just for Rizzo and this voracious need for money. It wasn't just these high city officials getting these salaries. The director of Administrative Service was making $422,000. The Director of General Service, $421. Director of Community Services was making $273. But so Reuben, though, had gone to this meeting, and he then calls the city desk, and he says, there are like hundreds of people here, and I'm getting ready to go home, and he says, I think Jeff should come out here too. So I drive in, and now Reuben is inside in the city council chambers, which seats 92 people. And I drive up, and he described, I mean, the lawn is just covered with people protesting, yelling Spanish and English. And I'm looking for something. And by that time, the two of us had done a video, right, on the LA Times website. So people might have known what we looked like, and I was also carrying a reporter's notebook like this. And it's difficult to walk through a crowd of people, so I start walking through, and the crowd parts, just parted. And people are cheering, and they're patting me on the back, and they're asking for my autograph. I mean, it was just an astonishing thing.
And he's floating when he's doing this, by the way.
Half the time as a reporter, people are mad at you. In this case, there were people mad at us, but they were the people who ended up being charged. So the meeting goes on, and in city council meetings, there's always a public comment period. And so what happens is basically in this meeting, what people would come up and they would turn to the council, and Rizzo wasn't even there, and Spacci wasn't there. They're kind of hiding in the back. People would look at the council and go, you guys should be put in prison. And the next person would come up and say, no, he's wrong. You guys should be executed. And this would go on. And what happened is, and Reuben ended up having to cover these meetings. They would often go till 2 in the morning because people would be, going after the city council. And he'd be sending me these emails saying, I hate you. And the city council members eventually stopped showing up to the council meetings. So there couldn't be a quorum. All business at the city just stopped dead, just stopped. And the city manager eventually had to move in and make sure things were going on at the city. And that, I can't tell you how gratifying it is to get those kinds of kudos from people there. There was one meeting, Reuben calls me up, he's at it, and the council had gone into a executive session, and he calls me and he says, listen to this, and he holds his phone out, and the crowd is going, Reuben, Reuben, Reuben. Another time, a longtime activist there, Carmen Bea, whose son is in the band Ozomatli, and Carmen, on a good day, is probably, 4'10", kind of wizened woman in her 70s and kind of all scrunched up, and she kisses Reuben, and she's
on the cheek,
and she says to me, "You are my guardian angel sent from God." I mean, these kinds of things which we, got from people, just kind of a wonderful feeling hearing from these people, and like I say, we did 100, 200 stories on this, and we mentioned the city council members getting all this money, and they've been charged with that. Now, it's not illegal to make too much money. What is illegal is the way it was done. So here's how the council members were making their money. And this is the reason we asked for the minutes. So the city council members were only getting paid $150 per council meeting. But they were also members of, I think, 5 city commissions. And they were getting paid $1,575 a month for each of them. And that's how the salaries got so high. These were commissions which seldom, if ever, met. For example, on July 31st, 2006, the Planning Commission met from 8 to 8:03. The Redevelopment Agency met from 8:03 to 8:04. The Surplus Property Authority met from 8:05 to 8:06. The Housing Authority met from 806 to 807. The Public Finance Authority met from 807 to 808. The Surplus Property Authority met once from January 07 through July 2010. The Solid Waste and Recycling Authority had not met since January 2005. So that's one of the things they have been charged with.
And keep in mind, that's taxpayers' money hard at work right there. So, again, why people were angry when this broke.
Now, one of the things we also found out is Rizzo's contracts, he would just write them up, wouldn't be approved by the council, he'd just send them through. He's been charged with that. Also, something happened is one day there was, after those first stories, they got a new city attorney, new city manager, the whole bit. So I'm talking to the this new city attorney, and he mentions these 5 contracts Rizzo had. And I'm going, what? I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, what it turned out, I mentioned these commissions. Rizzo, clearly in a way to try to disguise how much money he was making, and he was legally the executive director of these commissions. That's normal in most cities. Had these contracts drawn up, which divided his salary between each of these. So, and the whole idea of this was that if someone came in and said, I want to know how much Bob Rizzo makes as the city's chief administrative officer, he would hand you this contract, which shows he only made $221,000 a year, instead of what he really made. Now, he didn't give us that contract. I don't know why. Would it have faked us out? Probably. But so one day, Ruben calls me, and he says, so you know the fake Rizzo contracts? And I go, yeah. He says, signed by Oscar Hernandez, right? As mayor. I go, right. He goes, Oscar wasn't mayor then. So I go, wait a minute. We had it in the office, which we still do. It's called the Bell Room, which is a room which is just full of all our documents on Bell. So I go check the minutes. Ruben runs into the Bell Room, and Oscar Hernandez was not mayor when this contract was dated in 2008. George Mirabal was. And you want to talk about finding that out?
This is why you asked for minutes, because you want to. By now, we were questioning everything in Bell. Was it ever approved, and who should have been approving these, whatever we were looking at? And so, sure enough, these contracts. Okay, so the mayor is sort of signing off on these things. Go to the minutes of 2008, and you look to see who the mayor was at the time. And sure enough, it wasn't. It was another council member, George Mirabal, and not Oscar Hernandez. And then we used that to basically tell the story. I want to take some questions, so I'm going to try to summarize what happened after all this. We had almost every government agency investigating Bell for all sorts of things. You had the IRS, you had I think the FBI at some point. Obviously the
State Attorney General.
There was allegations of voter fraud.
Securities Exchange Commission.
Right.
Department of Corporations.
The state controller, who came down and basically audited Bell's books and found out all this stuff that was going on. Bob Rizzo gave out loans without any city council approval. He gave out loans to even a businessman for, I think, $300,000, I think it was.
But we reported on the loans before they found that out. So.
Right. And essentially all this, after all this investigating, this wasn't just Jeff and I, there were other reporters involved in this as well. Eventually what ended up happening was that these officials were, taken in handcuffs, and then now they're facing multiple charges of corruption. And now the city of Bell is trying to basically come out of this, and they have certainly a long road ahead of. I think right now they're even considering of dismantling the police department because they can't afford it. So the effects of these things, they're long lasting for a town like that. But it got other cities to pay attention. It got other, you know, citizens to finally start participating in government. It got the state controller. Actually, the state controller has a little more power now. He can go and basically audit a city whenever he wants, which is a great thing. To, you know, in Montebello, we've just discovered, you know, there's missing, what, $1 million that was missing. And the city of Vernon, you know, came close to being disincorporated because there's 95 people living there, and basically whoever is in city council or whoever's working in the city is basically just running the show. And also got other newspapers to kind of think back that this is what newspapers do. This is what we as a media do. We're not out, you know, we're out here to inform the public of any wrongdoing and hold people accountable for those things. And I think it did get other papers to start looking at their council members and how much their you know, city managers making, and it finally put together that we're now able to tell how much public employees do make. That's now put up. It's a requirement that they're supposed to lay out these salaries for you, the citizen, to basically inspect and look at. So it has changed a lot, and certainly that's what's gratifying when you're a reporter and you're able to make these, help out and push these changes through. So with that said, if there's any questions, I think we only have, like, what, 10 minutes? I don't, yeah. Okay, so questions?
But actually, the easiest way to do that is don't even mess with the city budget to find a salary. Ask for his file a Public Records Act asking to see his contract. Simple. Any other questions?
Yes, you in the back, or yeah, you, yeah. Not just Go ahead. Yes, sorry. Go ahead. Yes, there was, going back to the property taxes, the city of Bell was improperly taxed or illegally taxed about 2.9 or $2.9 million. That's how much money that was robbed from these homeowners. And so usually when, you know, the state controller comes in, he does the audit, says, hey, you guys were illegally taxed, you have to pay these citizens, you have to pay this money back. Now, the way it works is that money goes directly to the education. And so really you don't get that money back, but so many bad things were happening in the city that I think the lawmakers basically decided we need to give this money back to the city. So they came up with a
the legislature passed a special law. Yeah.
A special law that would allow the city of Bell to recoup that $2.9 million. So they did see some of that money back. The bond money, that's just, you know, they voted on it, so they're paying for it now, and it's costing them a lot of money. They're still they're still paying the second highest property taxes in the county, and that's not going to change for a while, I think.
Yes.
Not threats. After that, we realized that, I mean, that it'd be crazy for anyone to harm us. Not to say that no one would, but so not the threats part, but the stonewalling, I think, really affected us afterward. The city was bombarded with every newspaper and TV reporters, and they're all making their own public records requests, and and at the same time, the city's being investigated by the DA and by by other agencies and the state controller, and so they're dealing with those, and their idea is we don't have enough people to get your records, and really it was affecting. In fact, I even wrote about how the city was still stonewalling us on giving us documents that we requested, and we managed with sources to get other documents other ways, but that was really it. Yeah.
But there, to your question, I mean, we were deep in this for over a year, and there was a point where I got a little paranoid, and I considered telling the cops where I live, who I was, and that maybe you guys want to drive past every once in a while. I didn't, and
I thought I was untouchable. I don't know.
If anything happened to us, it would have been obvious who it was.
They're not going to mess with me.
Yeah, they don't mess with reporters.
I'm out covering a city council meeting late anyways. Yeah.
Did it ever go through your mind that you were going to possibly rise or pay off during any of these conversations with
No,
No.
not at all.
We're still waiting.
Yeah.
There would have to be lots of zeros.
Jeff hasn't claimed reimbursement for that dollar that he was forced to pay for that copy of the thing. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
My name is Scott Scollay.
He said, what?
Alumni. Oh, don't be shy.
Levels of corruption infiltrated our government may be exposed by these very people in this room. You may not realize this is only the tip of the iceberg. Think Titanic. Most of it you don't see. You know what the Prevailing Wage Act is? I'll explain it. Corruption grows like cancer. Common cancer is offered. Corruption grow like cancer. You drive by them all the time. Viewers and orange vest that has a stop sign. The prevailing wage for that person is $45 an hour. That's a little bit extreme. You haven't heard this. Maybe you do now. It's making you very much find our
Thank you. But, he makes a good point. Yeah. Working with Jeff. That came out so quickly.
He
See?
beat me to it. I was like moving the mic to say the same thing.
The hardest part, I think, is, the documents. Again, that was a very tough thing for us to get a hold of documents because they're so vital in these type of investigations. You don't want to just have people quoting people on a story. You want to show it. You want to show the facts that can't be disputed. And so not being able to get those access to those documents was one of the tough things. But we also had internally deadlines that have changed now for us through some odd deal that we made, I guess, with the Wall Street Journal. We published the Wall Street Journal first, and then so that pushes our deadline earlier, and so we were working with like a 2 p.m. deadline to get these stories up and running. So if it was going to be placed in the front page of the newspaper, then we had to get the story done by 2 p.m. As you can imagine, not everyone is available to take a phone call whenever you want them to pick up, and so that was also a very hard thing to work with.
And in most papers, if you're writing a story and the deadline's 5 or 6 o'clock, that's, you start out, it's no big deal. But you know, when the deadline is 2 o'clock, you're just hoping every sentence has a noun and a verb in it.
Yes. We've only worked on this story basically right from when that first council meeting happened, all the way until even, I don't know, you're still probably going to, because there's a trial we have to cover, so.
Probably for a year, this is all I did, nothing else. And I'd say this is probably 95% of what Ruben did, so that tells you. And that's, you know, helped working at the LA Times, where we were able to separate it from that. What also helped on this is working for an institution. I mean, if we were, say, a blogger, you know, the blogger sitting in his underwear, you know, in the basement writing, I mean, they would have been able to push us away. When we filed the Public Records Act, and I said, you know, if we don't get this stuff, we'll sue. I mean, I was serious, and they knew it. Whereas they had spent a lot of time. I mean, in Bell, say if Juan Martinez had filed the Public Records Act, and they had said, we're not going to give it to you, what's he going to do? Hire a lawyer? A, he probably can't afford it, and B, he probably isn't sophisticated enough with the Public Records Act to deal with it. So it really helped having an institution behind us to do that.
I think we got one more question, and that's about it. Anyone? Comment? No? Nothing? Okay.
Okay, well, thank
All
you
right,
very
well,
much.
thank you.